10. The mattress in the small, dingy hotel room was lumpy, and I shifted positions to keep a button from pinching my back. It didn't do too much good, though, so I just tried to forget my surroundings. My eyes followed the progress of a roach as he crawled across the ceiling. He finally darted into one of the hundreds of cracks in the wall. The small light that hung from the ceiling cast shadows against the walls. To amuse myself, I began to make silhouettes. Holding my fingers up, I'd make a donkey head. Quickly growing tired of this, I began to pace up and down. The 3 days I'd been cooped up in the room were beginning to tear on my nerves. The radio in the next room went on. That would be the pregnant woman next door getting up. Without even trying to listen, I could hear the water running in her face bowl. Soon the sound of her brushing her teeth came through the thin wall. I knew her next movement before she performed it. She would open the door and go down the hallway to the toilet, then spend the rest of the morning there, doing God knows what. I stood by my door and waited. Soon as I heard her come out, I opened mine. I stared at her as she paddled down the corridor towards me, wide-legged. She smiled as she passed. Again, I was shaken by the sight of her. She wasn't beautiful, not the way most men would judge beauty. To me, she seemed like an untamed queen. She was tall, taller than me. I'd always been drawn to dark women, and she was by far the most attractive black woman I had ever seen. She was jet black, and her skin seemed to be as soft as velvet. I watched her wide ass as she waddled down the hallway. It was extra large, but in her condition, that was expected. Oh well, I cautioned myself. You can look, but don't get involved. I had enough problems without getting the responsibility for some pregnant bitch didn't nobody else want. I stopped at the desk and paid my rent. It was $10 a week, or $2 a day. I had no desire to stay there permanently, so I paid mine daily. I caught a cab outside the hotel and went downtown. I found a drugstore and went into the money order counter. I counted my bankroll. $52 was the family jewels. For a moment, I hesitated, then went on and had a $25 money order made out to Tony. Next, I found the food counter and ordered breakfast. While waiting for it, I wrote a short note to Tony, then mailed it. After that, I got down to serious business. I spent the whole morning and most of the afternoon running in and out of stores, shortchanging the sales girls. After that, I had a men's store and played for 2 suits that came off a clothing rack, where the prices started at $100 or better. With both suits tucked under my armpits in a booster fold, I scanned the moving traffic until I saw an empty cab. After waving it down, I had to outrun 2 women shoppers to the cab door. I slammed the door in their faces and grinned at the driver. He smiled in return as I gave him the directions, then pulled out into the moving traffic. Stopping a block away from my destination, I paid my fare and started walking. My purpose for walking paid off quicker than I hoped. Towards the middle of the block, I entered a barber shop and sold both suits. When I came back out on the street, I felt pretty good with myself. I'd made over $200 hustling that day. The Ding Dong restaurant was partially empty when I entered. It was a large, greasy spoon slop house. In the middle of the floor was a horseshoe counter with 2 waitresses on the inside of it, each working a different side. I sat down in the curve of the counter so that I could watch the pinball machines lined up against the wall. The sound of laughter caused me to whirl around on my stool. 4 sporting girls, still in their teens, entered with 2 young pimps I had seen around. One of the men nodded towards me, while the other ignored me and went to the jukebox. As soon as the music began, 2 of the girls started dancing. George, the fat white proprietor of the restaurant, came out from the back and stood at the counter, watching the buttocks of the dancers. From the gleam in his eyes, I knew that the sign on the wall, "No dancing," meant nothing. When my food came, I just picked over it. The short, thin, light Negro who had gone to the jukebox took a seat near me and began speaking to the girls. "I've got to pimp or die," he yelled in a shrill voice. "If a whore don't give me no money, I'd starve to death. I don't know how to do nothing but pimp. Pimp or die." He continued to babble. "Some people think the game is cop or blow, but it ain't. It's cop, lock, and block, cop and hold." The girls shot me a startled glance. His remarks were directed at me. Everybody in this town seemed to know that I'd lost my ladies. "That's why," he continued, "it's pure delight for a bitch to choose me. I'm the sweetest thing this side of heaven. Why, a bitch would have to be crazy to leave me. Ain't that right, baby?" He turned to the girl sitting next to him for agreement. Her head bobbed up and down stupidly. If he had stated he could fly, she would have given him the same answer. The jukebox went silent. George came from behind the counter and put in some more money. He motioned to one of the girls dancing, and she ran over to punch some buttons. George slipped his arm around her waist and got a few free feels. She squealed with laughter, punched the last record quickly, and expertly slipped out of his grasp. Loudmouth jumped up with a yell. "Everything I do good," he shouted, and pulled the nearest girl from her stool and started dancing. After watching him a few moments, I knew I could make him wish he'd never learned to dance. From close observation, I knew the smaller the two girls dancing was the better dancer. Without hesitating, I grabbed her arm and pulled her towards the middle of the floor. I gave her a spin before she was ready and caught her hand when she came around. I dipped and started doing the new bop. She smiled up at me. All women love to dance with a man who knows what he is doing, and she quickly realized that I was exceptional. We danced as though we had been doing this together all our lives. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see the other couple. Loudmouth was doing the split, and whatever else came into his mind. He tried to outdo me, but it was useless. The harder he tried, the sillier he looked. The record ended, and I went back to my seat, with Tiny following me. "You sure are mellow, baby," she said, sitting down on the stool next to me. Her compliment was sweet to my ears. I turned around on my seat and stared at her. She was smaller than I'd thought. With shoes on, she still wouldn't stand over 5 feet. That was the only way you could call her small in height. Her legs and hips were extremely large for a woman her size, while her breasts would stand up to measurement in any company. "You like what you see?" she asked softly. I smiled and continued my meticulous examination. Her hair had been processed, and she wore it flat, combed to the front. It gave her the look of being fast and slick. She was golden brown, and her skin didn't have a blemish. There was a look about her eyes that seemed older than her body. She had the eyes of a woman who'd been hardened by life, yet she couldn't have been older than 18. "Everybody calls me Little Bit," she informed me. "So now, Whoreson, we know each other, don't we?" Her laughter was harsh, but pleasant at the same time. I remained silent and smiled at her knowingly. I knew she had used my name for the sole purpose of getting me to ask her how she found it out. I listened to her simple chatter. After a while, I came to the conclusion that Little Bit wasn't too bright. She talked constantly, in an unceasing flow, about various people in show business. It would have been impossible for her to have known all the entertainers she spoke of. After we had danced a few more times, Little Bit chose. I had copped a whore by the simple fact of being a good dancer, not because I brought some heavy game down to her or impressed her with how clever I was. She talked so fast that I hadn't been able to get my few words in. We left the restaurant and headed for my place. I was still trying to pimp from between my legs. Little Bit laid up with me till close to midnight, before she got up and started to dress. She dressed slowly and ran her mouth constantly. Having my own racehorse on the track meant a lot to me, but her persistent gibbering had destroyed the satisfaction I had felt about copping another mud kicker.